Judge, I'm live. My followers don't wait. That kid ruined my shot. I'll buy him 10 phones.
The courtroom doors didn't just open, they were practically shoved aside. The man who entered didn't move like a normal citizen. He walked as if he owned every square inch of the space. This was Jackson the Titan Miller, standing 6'5" and weighing nearly 300 pounds of solid muscle. He wore a t-shirt so tight the fabric looked like it was screaming for mercy, struggling to contain the mass beneath it. I am Frederick, and I have spent years studying courtroom body language. There is an interesting truth I've learned. Those who walk into court with the biggest physical display often possess the most fragile egos. Jackson didn't look at anyone. He wore wraparound sports sunglasses indoors, completely hiding his eyes. He chewed gum aggressively, his jaw working in rhythm with his heavy boots hitting the floor. One hand was jammed in his pocket, the other held a phone, his thumb scrolling as if this trial were merely a minor inconvenience in his workout schedule. The reaction in the room was instinctual. An elderly woman in the front row shrank back, clutching her purse tight. The bailiff's hand drifted unconsciously to his belt, his body tensing for trouble. Jackson's presence sucked the oxygen out of the room. He didn't need to say a word. His sheer mass and dismissive attitude shouted, "Your rules do not apply to me." Up on the bench, Judge Boyd did not look up immediately. She was turning pages in a file, her movements slow and terrifyingly precise. Unlike the warmth or patience you might see in other judges, Judge Boyd radiated a cold aura of absolute authority. She knew Jackson had entered. She felt the shift in the room, but she chose to ignore him. This was the first psychological strike, refusing to acknowledge the presence of someone desperate for attention. Jackson walked straight to the podium but didn't stand in the designated spot. He leaned his hip against the wood, crossing his arms to accentuate his massive tattooed biceps. He kept the sunglasses on. He kept chewing the gum. And worse, he kept looking at his phone. A full minute passed. The silence in the room became suffocating. Finally, Judge Boyd raised her head. Her eyes were sharp as razors, piercing right through Jackson's dark lenses. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't show anger. Her tone was low, cold, and cut through the wet sound of his gum chewing. "Defendant Miller," Judge Boyd said, her voice carrying the weight of a sledgehammer, "I don't know whose invitation you are waiting for, or if you think this is your private gym, but in here, I decide when you are allowed to breathe, let alone use a phone." Jackson slowly looked up from his screen, but didn't put it away. He smirked, a half-smile full of arrogance. "Calm down, Judge," his voice boomed, deep and resonant. "I'm handling business. I got millions of followers waiting for new content. You do your thing, I'll do mine. Let's make it quick. I got a leg day session at 10. The entire courtroom held its breath. The bailiff took a step forward. The court clerk stopped typing. Judge Boyd took off her reading glasses and set them down on the bench. The soft click sounded like a gavel strike in the minds of everyone present. "Do you think," Judge Boyd began, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "that the size of your muscles correlates to your authority in this room?" She pointed a finger at the bailiff, but her eyes remained locked on Jackson. "Confiscate the phone. Immediately. And if those sunglasses don't leave your face in the next 2 seconds, I will consider them evidence of contempt of court, and you will be wearing them in the county jail for the next 30 days. Jackson froze. The smile vanished. He had never been spoken to like that, certainly not by a woman half his size sitting behind a wooden desk. The real war was just beginning. The bailiff, a man half Jackson's width but carrying the weight of state authority, stepped into the personal space of the giant. For a split second, the air in the courtroom vibrated with potential violence. Jackson's jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck cording like steel cables. This was the moment where the street or the gym would have erupted into a shoving match. But this was Judge Boyd's arena, and the physics here worked differently. I'm Frederick, and what you are seeing here is what we call the false summit of power. Men like Jackson build their entire identity on physical intimidation. They believe size equals safety. But in a courtroom, size makes you a bigger target. Watch his hands. As the bailiff reached out, Jackson's fingers twitched. It wasn't just a phone being taken, it was his shield, his connection to his echo chamber of validation. With a sneer that didn't quite mask the hesitation in his eyes, Jackson slapped the phone into the bailiff's palm. The heavy thud echoed. Then, slowly, painfully slowly, he peeled the sunglasses off his face. The revelation was immediate. Without the dark lenses, Jackson Miller looked 5 years younger and 10 times less confident. His eyes were darting, scanning the room, suddenly realizing that without his props, he was just a man standing in a very quiet room under very bright lights. Judge Boyd watched the transformation without blinking. She didn't smile. She didn't nod in approval. She simply opened the file in front of her, her movements as sharp as a scalpel. Now that you have decided to join us in reality, Mr. Miller, Judge Boyd said, her voice dry and devoid of warmth, let's discuss why you are occupying my time. You are charged with 1 count of criminal mischief in the 3rd degree and 1 count of simple assault. The report states that at Olympus Iron Gym, you took a recording device belonging to a 17-year-old patron and crushed it under your boot. Is that accurate? Jackson shifted his weight, leaning back into his arrogance, trying to reclaim the space he had lost. He let out a loud, theatrical sigh. Look, the kid was in my light, Jackson said, waving a hand dismissively. I was filming a PR, a personal record. You don't interrupt a set. It's gym etiquette, unwritten rules. I did the kid a favor, teaching him respect. I even told him I'd buy him a better phone if he stopped crying, the gallery murmured. A young man in the back row shook his head. Judge Boyd's expression remained frozen, like a lake in winter. Gym etiquette, she repeated. The words tasted foreign in her mouth. You believe unwritten rules of a gymnasium supersede the penal code of this state? You believe that because you were lifting a heavy object, you acquired the legal right to destroy personal property? It wasn't just a heavy object, Jackson interrupted, pointing a thick finger at the bench. It was 500 pounds. Do you know the focus that takes? The kid was a hazard. I'm a brand, lady. My image pays my bills. If someone messes up my shot, they are messing with my money. Frederick's analysis. Pause right there. Did you hear it? Lady. In the hierarchy of courtroom suicide, referring to a female judge as lady is right near the top. Jackson is trying to drag the judge down to his level to turn this into a bar argument where he can dominate with volume and size. He hasn't realized yet that Judge Boyd isn't arguing with him. She is dissecting him. Judge Boyd leaned forward. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Mr. Miller, she said, her voice dropping to a register that forced everyone to lean in. You seem to be laboring under a significant delusion. You believe you are the protagonist of this proceeding. You believe your brand holds currency here. Let me correct you. To the world, you may be the Titan, but in my records, you are docket number 4,492. You are not a brand. You are a defendant. And you just addressed the court with a level of disrespect that suggests you are eager to explore the interior of a holding cell. Jackson blinked. The insults bounced off her like pebbles on a tank. He opened his mouth to retort, but Boyd cut him off, not by shouting, but by picking up a piece of paper. The police report notes something else, she continued, her eyes scanning the page. When the officers arrived, you refused to identify yourself. You told them to, quote, Google me. Is that correct? Jackson crossed his massive arms again, a defensive shield. Yeah, like I said, everyone knows who I am. I didn't, Judge Boyd said. The words were simple, but they landed like a slap, and neither does the law. The law is blind, Mr. Miller. It doesn't see your followers. It doesn't see your muscles. It only sees your actions. And right now, your actions look like those of a bully who has never been told no. Jackson's face flushed a deep, angry red. The vein in his temple began to pulse. He wasn't used to being insignificant. You calling me a bully? He growled, stepping away from the podium, moving into the open floor. I inspire millions. I built this body from nothing. What have you built? Sitting in that chair, judging people. The bailiff's hands snapped to his taser, but Judge Boyd didn't flinch. She just watched him, studying him like a biologist, observing a specimen in a jar. I have built, she said softly, a cage for people who think they are above the rules, and you are walking right into it. The silence that followed Judge Boyd's cage comment was heavy, the kind of silence that usually precedes a thunderclap. Jackson stood in the open floor, chest heaving, trapped between his instinct to intimidate and the cold reality of the armed bailiff stepping into his peripheral vision. 1, Judge Boyd counted. She didn't look at the bailiff. She looked straight at Jackson. 2, she didn't get to 3. The reptilian part of Jackson's brain finally calculated the odds. If he lunged, he would be tased before he crossed the bar. With a sneer that looked painful, he stepped back to the wooden podium. He gripped the sides of it so hard the wood groaned, a physical manifestation of his need to crush something when he couldn't control the situation. I'm Frederick, and what you just witnessed is the recall of the alpha. In the wild, or in the gym, Jackson is used to being the biggest animal. When he steps forward, others step back. But Judge Boyd didn't flinch. She held her ground. By forcing him to return to the podium, the designated spot for the accused, she stripped him of his physical advantage and reestablished the hierarchy of the room. He is no longer the titan, he is the child being sent to the corner. Wise choice, Judge Boyd said, her voice remaining at that terrifyingly calm baseline. She picked up a new document. Now, let's address your justification. You claimed the victim, a 17-year-old high school student named Leo, was a hazard. You claimed he ruined your shot. I have the statement from the gym manager here. She read from the paper, her articulation precise. The victim, Leo, was attempting to unrack weights left behind by the defendant. The defendant had occupied the squat rack for 45 minutes while setting up a tripod and ring light. When Leo asked if he was finished, the defendant grabbed Leo's phone, which was in his hand, and smashed it. Judge Boyd lowered the paper. So, Mr. Miller, it wasn't that he walked into your shot. It was that he dared to ask you to share the equipment. Is that the gym etiquette you were preaching about? Jackson rolled his eyes, a gesture so exaggerated it seemed performed for a camera that wasn't there. You don't get it, Jackson sighed, shaking his head as if explaining astrophysics to a toddler. I was in the zone. I was resting between sets. It's about focus. The kid, look, he's a twig. 130 pounds, soaking wet. He doesn't need the power rack. He needs a sandwich. He was disrespecting the hierarchy. You don't ask the lion to move so the mouse can eat. The courtroom gasped. The sheer lack of self-awareness was staggering. Frederick's analysis, this is dehumanization. Listen to his language. Twig, mouse, lion. To Jackson, other people aren't human beings with rights. They are NPCs, non-player characters in the movie of his life. He classifies worthiness based solely on physical mass. In his mind, his size grants him moral superiority. He truly believes that breaking the phone wasn't a crime. It was a correction of the natural order. Judge Boyd stared at him for a long moment. Then, she leaned into the microphone. The hierarchy, she repeated. You view the world as a food chain, Mr. Miller. And you believe you sit at the top because you can lift heavy metal circles against gravity. That is a very primitive worldview. But let me explain the hierarchy of civilization to you. She gestured to the seal of the state on the wall behind her. In civilization, we have laws to protect the mice from the lions, because without laws, society is just a brawl. You assaulted a minor, you destroyed property, and your defense is that he was too small to deserve respect. I offered to pay for it, Jackson shouted, interrupting her. He slapped his hand on the podium. I told the cops I'd Venmo the kid $1,000 right there. That's double what his cheap phone was worth. I got money. I solve problems. Why are we wasting tax dollars on this when I can just cut a check? Because Judge Boyd cut in, her voice sharpening like a blade. Dignity is not for sale on Amazon. You think your wallet is a get-out-of-jail-free card. You think because you can replace the object, you erase the act. But you didn't just break a phone, Mr. Miller. You humiliated a young man in front of his peers. You used your physical size to terrorize someone smaller than you. Terrorize? Jackson laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He was crying. He's soft. I taught him a lesson. The real world is tough. He needs to toughen up. Judge Boyd's eyes narrowed. The real world is indeed tough, she said softly, but the real world also has consequences. You say you are a brand. You say you have millions of followers. Tell me, do your sponsors know that their ambassador attacks children? Jackson's face changed instantly. The arrogance faltered. For the first time, true fear flickered in his eyes. Not fear of jail, but fear of the one thing that actually mattered to him, his revenue stream. Whoa, Hold on, Jackson stammered, holding up a hand. Let's not bring them into this. This is a misunderstanding. I'm an influencer. I promote health, positivity. Positivity, Judge Boyd repeated, reaching for a remote control on her desk. That is an interesting word choice, because the prosecution has just provided me with the video evidence. Not from your camera, Mr. Miller, but from the gym's security feed. Would you like to watch this positivity together? Jackson swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed in his thick neck. He knew what was on that tape, and he knew that once Judge Boyd played it, his narrative of being the misunderstood athlete would be shattered forever. A large monitor mounted on the wall flickered to life. The courtroom darkened slightly, shifting the focus from the man to the screen. Jackson couldn't look at it. He stared at his boots, his jaw grinding that gum into dust. But everyone else, the gallery, the bailiff, and most importantly, Judge Boyd was transfixed. The footage was black and white, silent, but the violence needed no audio. I'm Frederick, and as we watch this, pay attention to proxemics, the use of space. Notice the victim, Leo. He is standing at the very edge of the frame, shoulders hunched, holding his phone close to his chest. This is submissive posturing. He is making himself small to avoid conflict. Now look at Jackson. He isn't just working out. He is territorializing the gym. His tripod is set up 5 feet away from the rack. His gym bag is on the bench. His water gallon is on the floor. He has effectively claimed a 20-foot radius as his kingdom. On screen, Leo approached tentatively. You could see him mouth a question. He pointed to the empty squat rack. Jackson didn't just turn around. He exploded. The video showed Jackson stepping into Leo's personal space, his chest bumping the teenager. Leo stumbled back, hands raised in an apology, but Jackson kept coming. He loomed over the boy, shouting something that made the veins in his neck bulge even on the grainy footage. Then, the moment of impact. Jackson snatched the phone from Leo's hand, not because it was in the way, but because he wanted to take something. He raised it high and spiked it onto the concrete floor with the force of a touchdown celebration. Then, as if that wasn't enough, he stomped on it. The courtroom was dead silent. The violence of the act was shocking. It wasn't a correction of etiquette. It was a tantrum. Judge Boyd paused the video right at the moment Jackson was screaming in the terrified boy's face. The image froze, a 300-pound man terrorizing a kid who looked like he might break if the wind blew too hard. Positivity, Judge Boyd said, her voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. She turned from the screen to the defendant. Is that the brand of positivity you promote, Mr. Miller? Because from here, that looks like assault. That looks like a man who uses fear to compensate for a lack of character. Jackson shifted uncomfortably. It looks worse on video, he mumbled, his voice losing its boom. There's no audio. You can't hear what he said. He was being smart with me. He asked if he could work in. Judge Boyd corrected, reading from the witness statement again. He asked to share. And your response was to destroy his property. But there is something else in this video I want to address. She hit play again. After the smash, Jackson turned back to his tripod. He checked the angle. He flexed his bicep. Then he resumed his set. He didn't even check to see if the boy was okay. He simply went back to posing. Frederick's analysis. This is the most damning moment. It's called pathological narcissism. Most people, even after losing their temper, will have a moment of regret or adrenaline dump where they check the damage. Jackson didn't. In his mind, the interaction was over the moment he won. He immediately pivoted back to his reflection. The boy ceased to exist. This lack of object permanence regarding other people's feelings is chilling. You went back to your set, Judge Boyd said, her tone filled with genuine disgust. You just committed a crime, traumatized a child, and your immediate priority was to ensure your lighting was still good for your Instagram reel. I gotta finish the pump, Jackson blurted out, then immediately regretted it. The pump, Judge Boyd repeated. She let the word hang there, ridiculous and small. You know, Mr. Miller, I see a lot of people in this courtroom. Thieves, addicts, violent offenders. Usually there is a reason. Poverty, addiction, desperation. But you? You are a tourist in the criminal justice system. You committed violence for vanity. You hurt a child for the pump. She leaned back, interlacing her fingers. You mentioned earlier that you are an influencer, that you have sponsors. I assume these companies sponsor you because they believe you represent health, discipline, and strength. Jackson nodded, trying to salvage his image. Yeah. Supplements, clothing. I'm a top-tier athlete. Well, Mr. Top Tier, Boyd said, picking up her pen. I think it is only fair that your sponsors see the real you. This court proceeding is public record. That video is now evidence. And I have a feeling that when Protein Tech and Titan Wear see their ambassador bullying a high school student, the only thing you will be influencing is the unemployment line. Jackson panicked. You can't do that. That's my livelihood. You're trying to cancel me. I am not canceling you, Judge Boyd said, her eyes cold as ice. I am holding you accountable. You wanted to be famous, Mr. Miller? Congratulations. You are about to go viral, but not for your muscles. She turned to the prosecutor. Is the victim, Leo, present in the court today? Yes, Your Honor, the prosecutor said. He is in the back row with his mother. Please, Judge Boyd said, her voice softening instantly as she looked past the Hulk at the podium. Ask him to approach. I think it is time Mr. Miller remembers what a human being looks like. Jackson stiffened. Facing a judge was one thing. Facing the kid, he crushed while stripped of his sunglasses, his phone, and his dignity was a different fight entirely. The contrast was striking as Leo stepped forward. He walked past the defense table, giving Jackson a wide berth, his eyes fixed on the floor. He was slim, wearing a button-down shirt that looked slightly too big for him, his hands clasped tightly in front of his waist. Beside the hulking mass of Jackson Miller, Leo looked fragile. But in this room, fragility was not a weakness. It was evidence. I'm Frederick, and this is what we call the mirror of guilt. When a bully is forced to stand next to their victim in a neutral setting without their posse, without the adrenaline of the gym, the reality of their actions becomes impossible to ignore. Jackson shifted his weight, crossing his arms, looking at the ceiling, looking at his lawyer, looking anywhere but at the boy he had terrorized. His body language is screaming avoidance. He wants to disappear, but his own size makes that impossible. Judge Boyd's face softened completely. The razor-sharp edge she used on Jackson vanished, replaced by a maternal, protective warmth. Good morning, Leo, she said gently. Thank you for being brave enough to come here today. I know this isn't easy. Leo cleared his throat, his voice cracking slightly. Good morning, Your Honor. Leo, Judge Boyd continued, I have seen the video. I know what happened to your property, but I want to know what happened to you. How did that interaction make you feel? Leo took a breath. He glanced sideways at Jackson, then quickly looked back at the judge. I felt stupid, Leo said quietly. I saved up all summer for that phone. I worked the grill at Burger King, double shifts. It was the first thing I ever bought with my own money. I wanted to start filming my own workouts, not to be famous, just to track my progress. He paused, his hands shaking slightly. When he smashed it, it wasn't just the phone. It was the way he looked at me, like I was trash, like I didn't belong there. I haven't been back to the gym since. I canceled my membership. The gallery was silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Jackson let out a loud, impatient huff. Okay, look, Jackson interrupted, leaning over the podium. I get it. Sad story. Kid worked hard. Whatever. Your Honor, I told you, I'll write him a check right now for $2,000. That buys him a new phone and a year's membership at a better gym. Can we just move on? The air in the room didn't just freeze, it shattered. Judge Boyd slowly turned her head from Leo to Jackson. The warmth was gone instantly, replaced by absolute zero. You think, Judge Boyd said, her voice barely a whisper, that this is a negotiation? I'm offering restitution, Jackson argued, throwing his hands up. That's what the law wants, right? To make him whole? $2,000 makes him whole. I make that in one sponsored post. Let's just fix it. You make that in one post, Judge Boyd repeated, picking up on the phrase, and Leo worked all summer for it. Do you see the difference, Mr. Miller? Or is your view from the pedestal so high that you can't distinguish between price and value? She stood up, leaning over the bench. You aren't offering restitution. You are offering hush money. You are trying to buy your way out of guilt because it is cheaper for you to write a check than to feel shame. but you cannot write a check for the fear you put in this young man. You cannot Venmo him his confidence back. Jackson rolled his eyes. You're being dramatic. It's just a phone. Frederick's analysis, this is the fatal error. Minimization. Narcissists often minimize the impact of their actions to protect their own ego. By calling it just a phone, Jackson is trying to rewrite reality to make himself the victim of an overreaction. But Judge Boyd is about to teach him that in her courtroom, reality is non-negotiable. Just a phone, Judge Boyd said, her eyes narrowing. To you, it is a toy. To him, it was a trophy of his discipline. It represented hundreds of hours of labor. It represented pride. You didn't just break a device, Mr. Miller. You crushed his effort. And then you stood there and told him he was worthless. She turned back to Leo. Leo, I want you to look at Mr. Miller. Look at him. Leo hesitated, then slowly turned his head. He looked up at the man who had terrified him. Does he look like a titan to you right now? Judge Boyd asked. Leo looked at Jackson sweating, stripped of his sunglasses, being scolded by the judge. Leo shook his head. No, Your Honor. Exactly, Judge Boyd said. He looks like a man who never learned that true strength is about lifting others up, not putting them down. Mr. Miller, you have offered $2,000. That offer is noted, but the court does not accept it as a settlement. We accept it as a starting point. Jackson blinked. Starting point? What does that mean? It means, Judge Boyd smiled, a cold, predatory smile, that we are just getting started with the bill. Jackson stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. The concept that money couldn't fix a problem was foreign to him. In his world, everything had a price tag. The supplements, the gym membership, the followers, even the respect he demanded. He looked at his lawyer, who was furiously scribbling notes and shaking his head, signaling that this was not going well. I'm Frederick, and watch Jackson's eyes. They are widening, blinking rapidly. This is the physiological response to a loss of control. For a narcissist, money is a tool of control. It allows them to bypass accountability. By rejecting the settlement as a solution, Judge Boyd didn't just refuse the money, she stripped him of his only remaining weapon. He is now naked in the arena. Mr. Miller, Judge Boyd said, her voice devoid of emotion, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. You are sentenced to pay restitution to the victim in the amount of $2,000. That will cover the phone and his gym fees. But that is the civil matter. Now we address the criminal matter. She picked up her gavel, testing its weight in her hand. You claimed this gym, Olympus Iron, is your place of business. You claimed you have unwritten rules there. Well, I have a written rule for you. As part of your probation, you are hereby issued a no trespass order for Olympus Iron Gym, effective immediately. The reaction was visceral. Jackson physically recoiled as if he'd been punched in the gut. What? He shouted, his voice cracking. You can't do that. That's my gym. That's where I film. That's where my lighting is. You're taking away my livelihood. I am taking away your hunting ground, Judge Boyd corrected calmly. You proved you cannot exist in that space without being a danger to others. You treat a shared public space as your private kingdom. So, the kingdom is closed. But I have a contract, Jackson yelled, slamming his hand on the podium again. I have a partnership with the owners. Not anymore, Judge Boyd said, glancing at a new sheet of paper. The prosecutor has just informed me that the gym owner, upon seeing the security footage this morning, has already revoked your membership. He doesn't want his gym associated with child bullying either. It seems your brand is becoming toxic, Mr. Miller. Frederick's analysis. This is the extinction burst. Watch him. He is pacing, waving his arms, shouting. When a person accustomed to getting their way finally hits an immovable wall, they don't accept it quietly. They explode. They ramp up the behavior that usually works aggression and volume, hoping to bully reality back into submission. But Judge Boyd is immune to tantrums. This is ridiculous, Jackson roared, turning to the gallery, looking for allies. She's ruining my career over a phone. Do you see this? This is a witch hunt, Mr. Miller, Judge Boyd said. She didn't shout. She didn't stand up. She simply lowered her voice to a register so cold it could freeze water. One more outburst, and I will add 30 days of jail time to your sentence. Test me. Jackson stopped mid-shout. His chest heaved. He glared at her, breathing hard through his nose, a bull trapped in a chute. Good, Boyd said. Now, for the second part of your sentence, you seem to care a great deal about your online presence. You told me you have millions of followers. You told me you are an influencer, so let's use that influence. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. In addition to 200 hours of community service, you will post a video apology to Leo, not a story that disappears in 24 hours. A permanent post on your main feed. You will admit what you did. You will admit you were wrong. And you will tag the anti-bullying organization I am assigning you to. Jackson's face went pale. To a man like him, public humiliation was a fate worse than jail. I can't do that, he whispered, his voice trembling. That kills the algorithm. That destroys my image. My sponsors, they want an alpha. They don't want an apology. Then perhaps it is time we redefine what an alpha is, Judge Boyd said mercilessly, because from where I sit, a man who is afraid to say I'm sorry on the internet is the weakest man in the room. You have 48 hours to post it, or you surrender yourself to the county jail for 6 months. The choice is yours. Do you want to save your image, or do you want to save your freedom? Jackson looked at Leo, then at the judge, then at the floor. The Titan was shrinking. The air was leaving the balloon. I'll post it, he muttered, the words tasting like ash. I know you will, Judge Boyd said. But we aren't done yet, because there is one more thing your gym etiquette failed to teach you. Judge Boyd leaned back, the faintest ghost of a smile, touching her lips not out of happiness, but out of the satisfaction of a trap snapping shut. You mentioned earlier, she said, her voice smooth and dangerous, that you were too busy in the zone to re-rack your weights or share the equipment. You called it gym etiquette. You said lions don't move for mice. Well, Mr. Miller, in my courtroom, we believe in remedial education. She flipped a page in the file, signing her name with a sharp, scratching sound that echoed in the silent room. Your 200 hours of community service will not be served picking up trash on the highway. That would be too easy for a man of your physical capability. Instead, I have arranged a special placement for you at the Southside Community Center. Jackson blinked, confused. The community center? Like the YMCA? Exactly, Judge Boyd said. They have a weight room. It is old. It is rusty. And it is used primarily by senior citizens and at-risk youth. Your job will be simple. You are not there to train. You are not there to coach. You are not there to be an influencer. She paused for effect. You are there to be the racker. You will follow the seniors and the teenagers. When they finish a set, you will unload their bars. You will wipe down their benches. You will organize the dumbbells by weight. You will do the very thing you felt you were too important to do at Olympus Iron. Jackson's jaw dropped. You want me to be a maid? For old people? I want you to be of service, Judge Boyd corrected sharply. And there is one specific condition to your probation. While you are on the premises of the community center, you are strictly forbidden from lifting weights for your own exercise. If the supervisor catches you doing a single bicep curl, you go straight to jail. I'm Frederick. And this is what we call the Tantalus punishment. In Greek mythology, Tantalus was punished by standing in a pool of water beneath a fruit tree with low branches, with the fruit ever eluding his grasp. Judge Boyd is placing Jackson in his natural habitat, the gym, but denying him the dopamine hit of the workout. She is forcing him to watch others train while he serves them. For a narcissist whose entire identity is built on being the biggest guy in the room, being reduced to the cleaning crew, while weaker people lift, is psychological torture. It attacks his identity fusion, the belief that he is his muscles. You can't do that, Jackson protested, his voice rising in genuine panic. If I don't lift for 200 hours, I'll atrophy. I'll lose mass. This is cruel and unusual punishment. You are worried about shrinking muscles? Judge Boyd asked, eyebrows raised. Leo was worried about a shrinking spirit. I think you will survive a few weeks of cardio and humility. Maybe while you are wiping down the bench for a 70-year-old woman, you will learn that strength is not about how much iron you can move, but about how much respect you can show. This is sabotage, Jackson muttered, gripping the podium. You're jealous. That's what this is. You're jealous of what I built. The gallery gasped. Even his lawyer face-palmed, burying his head in his hands. Judge Boyd didn't get angry. She actually laughed, a dry, short sound. Jealous? She repeated. Mr. Miller, I interpret the law. You lift heavy things and put them back down. Well, actually, you don't even put them back down, which is why we are here. Do not mistake your hobby for a contribution to humanity. She looked at the bailiff. The defendant is remanded to the clerk's office for processing. Any further outbursts will result in the bailiff assisting you to the floor. And Mr. Miller? Jackson looked up, defeated, stripped of his glasses, his phone, his gym, and his ego. Yeah? He croaked. When you post that apology video? Judge Boyd said, her eyes gleaming. Make sure you smile. Positivity is a brand, remember? Jackson slumped. His massive shoulders rolled forward, making him look inches shorter. He turned to look at Leo one last time. The boy wasn't looking at the floor anymore. He was looking right at Jackson, and he wasn't afraid. Frederick's analysis, look at the shift in power dynamics. Leo's chin is up, Jackson's chin is down, the spell is broken. The Titan has been revealed to be nothing more than a man in a tight shirt with a bad attitude. Judge Boyd didn't just punish a crime, she dismantled a delusion. She proved that in the architecture of civilization, the gavel is always heavier than the dumbbell. Jackson turned and began the long walk down the center aisle. He didn't stomp this time. He didn't shove the doors. He walked slowly, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on him, not admiring his physique, but judging his character. But as he reached the doors, Judge Boyd's voice cut through the air one last time. Oh, and Mr. Miller? Jackson stopped, his hand on the doorframe. He didn't turn around. Don't forget your sunglasses, she said. It's bright outside. The screen fades from the courtroom to a vertical iPhone video format. It is shaky. The lighting is bad, fluorescent, and unflattering. There is no ring light, no filters. Just Jackson Miller, sitting in his car, looking directly into the lens without his sunglasses. Hey guys, Jackson says, his voice is quieter than we have ever heard it. So there's been a situation. I made a mistake, a big one. He swallows hard, looking off camera, perhaps remembering the jail time hanging over his head if he messes this up. I bullied a kid at the gym, Leo. I broke his phone because I thought I was more important than him. I was wrong. I let my ego get bigger than my character. I'm sorry to Leo, and I'm sorry to you guys for selling a fake version of strength. I'm Frederick, and this is what we call ego dissolution. For the first time, Jackson isn't performing. Watch his micro expressions. The look down and to the left indicates shame. The lack of editing indicates vulnerability. By posting this to millions of followers, he isn't just apologizing. He is dismantling the Titan myth he spent 10 years building. It is painful, but it is the first honest thing he has done in a decade. The scene shifts. We are now inside the Southside Community Center. It is a far cry from the neon-lit luxury of Olympus iron. The weights are rusted iron. The benches are taped up with duct tape. The air smells of old sweat and liniment oil. Jackson is there. He isn't wearing his Titan tank top. He is wearing a plain gray t-shirt. He is holding a spray bottle and a rag. An elderly man, perhaps 80 years old, struggles to pull a 45-pound plate off a barbell. He is shaking. In the past, Jackson would have sighed, rolled his eyes, or filmed it to mock him. Today, Jackson steps forward. I got it, boss, Jackson says. He slides the plate off with one hand effortlessly, but instead of flexing, he simply places it on the rack. Thanks, young man, the old guy says, patting Jackson's massive arm. You're strong. Jackson looks at the plate. Then he looks at the old man. Working on it, Jackson replies softly. Just working on it. Frederick's analysis. This is the resolution. Judge Boyd's punishment wasn't about humiliation. It was about service. By forcing Jackson to use his strength to help the weak, literally unburdening them, she rewired his association with power. He is no longer lifting to be seen. He is lifting to be useful. He is legally forbidden from exercising his muscles, so he is forced to exercise his empathy. This is the only way to rehabilitate a narcissist. remove the mirror, and replace it with a window into other people's lives. The final shot returns to the empty courtroom. Judge Boyd is packing her bag. The bailiff is locking the doors. The silence is heavy, but it feels clean. Justice isn't always about prison bars. Sometimes it's about breaking the mirrors we build around ourselves so we can finally see the world clearly. Jackson Miller walked in thinking he was a god because he could bench press 500 pounds. He walked out realizing that he was a small man because he couldn't lift a 17-year-old spirit. Judge Boyd didn't just destroy a bodybuilder. She deconstructed a bully and handed him the blueprints to build a man. The screen fades to black. Text appears on screen. Jackson completed his 200 hours. He never returned to Olympus Iron. He now coaches a youth powerlifting team at the community center. Leo bought a new phone and hit a new PR last week. And that brings us to the end of this case. I am Frederick. This is the courtroom where excuses go to die and reality comes to collect its debt. If you enjoyed watching arrogance get crushed by the heavy weight of justice, hit the like button and subscribe. See you at the next docket.